Well, good afternoon, everybody, and you're very welcome to this Oyster World Rally webinar. Hi, I'm Paul. Hopefully, you can see me. I'm sitting here in the Oyster Yard in Southampton. So I'm curious. We've got hundreds of people in the room at the moment. So just tell us where you've dialed in from. It'd be interesting to see just whilst we wait for other people to join the webinar. Fantastic. Well, listen, it's great to see you all. You're all very welcome. There's loads of familiar names there. I can see the chat box just on the right hand side. So in the room, what you will see is you've got the chat box in there. Any questions you've got for us and the team throughout the webinar, just post them in the chat. And at the Q&A at the end of the webinar, we will answer them. And if not, and if it's something we can do there and then, we'll answer in the chat box to you. Now, I'm not alone, so I'm going to introduce you to the team that's also online with me at the moment. But I just want to say just a couple of words about what the Oyster World Rally actually is. Now, I was lucky enough to skipper the first Oyster 885 in the Oyster World Rally, the first one, which happened in 2013 and 14. And let me tell you, the Oyster World Rally is not just a circumnavigation or a sailing event. It is a life-changing experience. And so I'd really urge you that if you are interested in actually fulfilling that lifelong dream of sailing around the world, then the Oyster World Rally is a really good thing to do. Anyway, there you go. It's an amazing experience. Let's crack on into the webinar and let me introduce who we've got with us here. So first of all, you've got me. So I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of Oyster Yachts. And also, more importantly for you guys on this webinar, I skippered Lush, which was the first Oyster 885 around the world in the first Oyster World Rally. So I can tell you firsthand exactly what the rally is like. With me, I also have Ali. Ali, are you there? Hopefully she'll pop up. There she is. So let me hand you over to Ali Smith, who will be running the Oyster World Rally. So over to you, Ali.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ali Smith, and I've joined the Oyster team recently as head of group events, which includes the amazing opportunity to oversee the running of the Oyster World Rally, as well as the Oyster Regattas in Palma and Antigua. I'm very, very excited to be here and looking forward to meeting up with oyster owners, new and seasoned, as soon as I can. A little bit about myself. I've spent the last 20-something years in the sailing industry, starting with 10,000 miles and a few more, crewing on tour ships worldwide. And then I raced around the world upwind and into the Southern Ocean on the British Steel Challenge yacht race back in the 1990s. I've subsequently had the pleasure of working for some of the UK's top sailors, including Sir Che Blythe, Mike Golding, Robbie Knox-Johnston, Dee Kafari, and Tracy Edwards. I ran my own RA training centre and race training school for 13 years, culminating in wins in the classic offshore races, including the Fastnet, the Middle Sea, and the Caribbean races. I'm very passionate about sailing, and I think that the Oyster World Rally is such an amazing event. I'm so tempted that I really want to do it myself. That's a little bit about me, and I'd like to pass you over to my colleague, Millie. Millie, are you there?
Hi, everybody. Hi, so my name's Millie, and I've been part of the Oyster family for over 6 years now, both as professional crew and as an employee based in the Ipswich office. I grew up on the east coast of the UK, racing dinghies competitively and as part of the British sailing team. I then went on to crew on board a number of Oyster yachts professionally, sailing over 30,000 nautical miles. I've sailed in 8 Oyster regattas and managed the Oyster Palma regatta last year. In 2018, I joined the Oyster World Rally as crew on board Oyster 825 Enzo and sailed from the Marquesas to New Zealand. Sailing the Pacific as part of the Oyster World Rally is by far the highlight of my sailing career, and I don't think it will ever be beaten. I'm looking forward to meeting the participants of the 22 Oyster World Rally and being part of this incredible journey. Now I'd like to pass over to Eddie Scoogle.
Hello everyone. Video has dropped out for the time being, which is lucky for you. I've been a sailor for 50 years this year. My wife and I planned and ran the very first Oyster World Rally in 2013, although my first circumnavigation started in 1995. I worked directly with Oyster for 22 years, and I'm looking forward to being part of the next World Rally as well. Oh, here I am. Let's pop back in again. So, without further ado, I'll hand you back to Ali, who will take you through the rest of her part of the seminar. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm back again. I'd just like to talk you through what it takes to join the World Rally and how to prepare yourselves and to prepare your boats so that you have the best opportunity to have the best time of your life. Now, the first thing is why should we train? Well, sailing around the world is and will be a life-changing event. So the more preparation you make before setting sail will mean the more enjoyable it will be and the more you'll get out of the experience. And you want it to be the experience of a lifetime. It really must be your priority. Perfect planning will enhance your enjoyment of your experience and give you the confidence you need to concentrate on sailing and visiting those beautiful places you have only dreamed of, rather than worrying about what may go wrong with your yacht. The Ocean World Rally offers the best training advice available from industry experts, which includes oyster suppliers, the oyster technical team, and previous rally participants. And it covers all aspects of preparing your yacht, yourself, which is very important, and also your crew for this once in a lifetime event. The training that we offer will cover such subjects as your engine, which is very important, also your generator and your boat electrics, rigging and sail making, electronic navigation and power management, water maker servicing and fault finding, refrigeration maintenance, deck hardware and hydraulics, safety, weather and meteorology, downwind sailing techniques, plus courses in long-range radio, medical, sea survival, and ocean navigation theory. We encourage participation in all our training, seminars and workshops prior to the start of the Ocean World Rally for at least the owner and or the skipper plus one more to help you be the best prepared as you can be. The compulsory courses are long-range radio, as you need this course to then get your license to be able to operate the equipment, and also to participate in the OysterNet daily radio schedule whilst on the rally. And that's really important because it gives you that lifeline of being able to speak to everybody else that's on the rally, even if you can't see them. And it's a really great networking and social part of the event. Other courses that are compulsory are a medical course, ocean navigation, and we recommend the Our Way Yachtmaster Ocean Theory, and then also sea survival course for all of your crew. Again, this is quite important. Our training takes place mainly at our suppliers' HQs, and we have tailor-made the programme to amalgamate together suppliers that are located close to each other and have complementary products. We have tried to devise a programme for minimal travel, especially for our overseas participants. So when does the training start? The Oyster Events team have put together the training and workshop programme for oyster owners on the Ocean World Rally, starting in October this year and running throughout the whole of 2021. We start with our postponed introductory seminar in Southampton on the 17th, 18th of October, and this will be at the Royal Southern Yacht Club in Hamble. The first training workshops will be early December in the Ipswich and Colchester area. We'll be sending the training programme to all the Oyster World Rally participants in the next few weeks. So that concludes my seminar and training section, and I'd like to hand you back to Paul, who is going to talk to you about the Oyster World Rally route. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Ali. Super. Okay, so let's have a quick overview of the route. So I'm just going to play a little video here for you to see. So obviously this is a global circumnavigation. Many of you will probably start from the Mediterranean, maybe from Palma, and you'll make your way over to the start of the Oyster World Rally that will start on January the 9th in Antigua. Of course, if you're in America, you may be sailing down the east coast of America and sailing down to the Caribbean. From Antigua, we then make ourselves west across through to Panama, out to Galapagos and into the Pacific. The longest leg is Galapagos to the Marquesas, Tahiti, Bora Bora, through the stunning South Pacific Ocean. From here, from Vanuatu, we head slightly south over the top of New Caledonia and over to Australia to Mackay before heading north through the Whitsundays, Cairns, Darwin and over to Indonesia. From there, we'll head across the Indian Ocean through Cocos Keeling to the stunning islands of Mauritius and Reunion. And from there, then we cross the Agulhas Current to Durban before we round Cape Agulhas and arrive to Cape Town for Christmas. From there, you'll then sail up the South Atlantic, cross back over to the northeast coast of South America and up to Grenada and back to Antigua. So there it is. That's your world circumnavigation in literally just a couple of minutes. It obviously takes a little bit longer than that. Well, obviously part of today's webinar is actually to take you into and have a look at what the weather patterns will be like as you sail around the world. And I'm really delighted to introduce you to Chris Tibbs. So Chris is a meteorologist. He is also a sailor. So he's raced around the world 3 times, and he's also the holder of 6 world speed sailing records. He's the author of the Our Weather Handbook, and he's recently sailed with his wife to Australia. Now, right from the beginning, he has been involved with the Oyster World Rally, and he's also been advising us from a meteorological point of view. Now, I can remember having a forecast from Chris when we were sailing lush around the bottom of South Africa in the first Oyster World Rally. And I remember the email arriving in at about 8 o'clock in the evening. It was dark, we were sailing, and I read the email, and the email said, "Hi Paul, Chris here. Just so you know, the wind is going to shift by 35 degrees towards the south and pick up to 35 knots at 22:20 this evening." Now, I remember when I read that thinking, how on earth does this guy sitting in the UK know that? And surely that's not true. Well, let me tell you, at 22:18, the wind did shift 35 degrees to the south, and it did pick up to 35 knots. So I can tell you that Chris is absolutely the real deal. So I'd just like to give a very warm welcome to Chris, and Chris now is going to take us through the global weather patterns of the route. So Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Paul. With an introduction like that, I don't really need to say a great deal more. My wife and I, Helen, have just sailed to Australia on our own boat. Sadly, not an oyster, but we did have a really great trip. And it is an absolutely fabulous journey. So, the weather. Why do we do this route and when do we go? Well, the why is that it's the trade wind route around the world, and for that we stay in the tropics. But being in the tropics, we do have to watch out for tropical cyclones. Now, depending where you are in the world, in the North Atlantic, we call them hurricanes, and also in the eastern part of the Pacific, they're hurricanes. Then as you get further west, they're known as tropical cyclones or typhoons in the Indian Ocean. They are all the same event. They are tropical storms, and scientifically we call them tropical cyclones. So I'll try and stick with this through the next few minutes, even though I'll probably forget and slip into hurricanes now and again. So tropical cyclone seasons, they are driving where we go and when we go. Now, the easiest way to remember when the tropical cyclone seasons are, they're in the summer months of whichever hemisphere you're in. So if you're in the northern hemisphere, June to November is the tropical cyclone season. And that's why we don't normally sail in the Caribbean during those months. Then as we go through Panama, we go into the southern hemisphere, and the hurricane seasons then is November to April. So we have a window of opportunity to get through the southern hemisphere without going into the tropical cyclone season. Now, there are two areas on the route that are considered free from tropical cyclones, and that is between Panama and the Marquesas, and also the South Atlantic. So it gives us a little bit of extra time after we've gone through Panama. We can get as far as the Marquesas by March, April, and not be in the hurricane season. So it is the trade wind route, and that will be our typical conditions for the whole of the way round. I can quite honestly say that when Helen and I did UK to Australia, we only spent about 2 hours actually beating, and that was in less than 10 knots of breeze. So it is downwind nearly the whole of the way. And of course, we got lovely islands to visit. The route and the timing avoids those tropical cyclones and bad weather. And we have a bonus of favourable ocean currents. And also, another bonus, the water is warm all the way. Some of you will have already had experienced trade wind sailing. In the northern hemisphere, they tend to be between east and northeast, whilst in the southern hemisphere, east and southeast. And if we have to put an average on, it's around 15 to 20 knots, plus 4 to 5. So really nice sailing, although you can get quite long periods of time where it's closer to 20 to 25 knots. Now, whilst we're in the tropics, there's always at the back of our minds we could get some squalls. Now, squalls will build and then decline again, but on the leading edge of the squall, what's known as the gust front, we can have a gale force blast of wind with it. So there are a few things to watch out for, even though most of the sailing is real textbook ideal sailing. That's just showing us the route. You'll have already got to Antigua before the start, and then from Antigua across to Panama is the first part of the rally. Now, that route is actually through probably the windiest part of the Caribbean that there is, and just along the northern coast of Colombia, we do often get some fairly strong winds. It's a combination of the seasonal low pressure over Colombia and the Azores or Bermudan high to the north. So we've got a fairly tight pressure gradient, and then the wind is accelerated around the shape of Colombia and the mountains to the south. So whilst Colombia have got some nice places to go to, Santa Marta, Cartagena, it is just we need to watch that it will be quite strong wind around that area. Once you're past there, then we go to the San Blas. First time I went to the San Blas, I could not believe I was still in the Caribbean. It was my idea of a South Pacific island without having to go there. And it's absolutely lovely. And as you can see, it does get quite busy sometimes. During the rally, there's usually a bit of a party going on, and you can see there from the last Oyster World Rally on the beach, and you can find your own deserted beach there without any problems at all. Then onto the Panama. We go into the canal. You can see there all boats rafted up, and I think this slide shows just how small we are compared with the big ships that go through. And those ships are now even bigger now they've built the new canal and the new locks. Through the canal and out into the Pacific. Bit of a shock here as we're suddenly back into tides. And the tides in the Pacific by Panama are 4 to 5 meters. It's also quite an interesting place for the weather, because the general pattern is that the trade winds are blowing over Panama and affect you, but only at night, because during the day, as the land heats, a small sea breeze, fairly local sea breeze, tucks in underneath. So on the Panama City side, we have a real pattern to the weather: northerly winds at night and southerly winds during the day. Now, once we leave Panama, there's a group of islands called Las Perlas that we would normally stop in, but we're now moving from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere. And we go from the trade winds of the north to the doldrums. We tend to call the doldrums nowadays the ITCZ, the Intertropical Convergence Zone, because it's the convergence of the northeast trade winds of the north, the southeast trade winds of the south, and wherever you get convergence, you also get an ascent of the air, and that is what we know as the doldrums, the big clouds, the occasional squalls, and the light winds. Now, once we're through the doldrums, we start to pick up the southeasterly trade winds, but they do tend to be a little bit south of the Galapagos. So if we had to put an average on it, I'd say that between Panama and the Galapagos, you'll be sailing for the first half and then motoring or motor sailing for the second half to the Galapagos. However, sometimes we do manage to sail the whole way. Right, while we're in the Pacific, you will, just got ahead of myself there, a little picture of the doldrums and the clouds that we can see there. Now, in the Pacific, we all have heard of the El Nino, La Nina. It's a little bit of a seesaw. El Nino, when the water temperature gets a little bit warmer than average, and then La Nina, when it goes cooler. At the moment, we're in a neutral stage, but it's likely to be one or the other. Now, when we have an El Nino, that is when the air or the water is a little bit warmer, we generally have slightly lighter trade winds and a little bit more cloud and more rainfall in the eastern Pacific. However, the further west we get, there is a place called the South Pacific Convergence Zone that I'll come on to in a minute or two. And when we've got El Nino, the South Pacific Convergence Zone tends to be less pronounced. If we've got a La Nina, we get slightly stronger trade winds, so better at the beginning, although the South Pacific Convergence Zone usually becomes a little bit more active. There is a greater cyclone season west of the dateline, but we're going to miss the tropical cyclone season anyway, so that won't affect us. But it does tend to be wetter when you get to Australia. So there are pluses and minuses of whether it's a La Nina or El Nino season, and as we can't choose it, we just have to live with whatever it comes. Now, whilst the vast majority of the Pacific will be with trade winds, we do have a few things that we need to watch for. Once we get to Tahiti and that area, maybe the Tuamotus just before then, we do have to keep an eye on the forecast just in case we get a cold front coming up from the Southern Ocean. And if we do, then that tends to reverse the winds for a while. Few squalls, the wind from the opposite direction. It's not much of a problem, but you do need to take it into account when you're choosing your anchorage, which side of the lagoon to be anchored in, and also when you're just planning your passages. I mentioned before the South Pacific Convergence Zone. This is as we get further west. By then, our trade winds will be more easterly, but there's another band of wind that comes in from the southeast. And again, where you get the convergence of the airstreams, we tend to get some more rain and some squalls. So it's a little bit more mixed, the weather. The only time we have to really watch out for it is if there's an upper air trough or a cold front that comes up from the south, it can interact with the South Pacific Convergence Zone, bringing a period of slightly stronger wind and a lot more squalls. just something to watch for. And then we carry on in the trade winds to Australia. Now we go through the Barrier Reef, the Great Barrier Reef, into Mackay, and then up north inside the Great Barrier Reef. Now, as we close to the land, such a big landmass of Australia, it does give a more diurnal pattern to the wind. But we will still be in generally the trade winds, and we'll hold those trade winds through the Torres Straits. And you can see from this slide, the yellows and the bright green tends to be stronger wind. As we go through the Torres Straits, it becomes a little bit lighter. And as we get into Indonesia, the trade winds become less consistent and we get more of an effect from the land. Torres Straits actually are a very interesting navigational part because it's a fairly shallow sea, you've got strong trade winds and you've got a good current helping you. So it's a little more tricky than navigation, although the main passages are all well buoyed. There's a time to explore Indonesia. In Indonesia, they never say there's a high season and a low season. But when we're there, it's considered the dry season and the main trade winds are south to southeast. And that goes through from June to September. And then the wet season, or sometimes known as the monsoon, is November to March. After enjoying Indonesia, we're into the Indian Ocean. Quite a long passage here with a few nice islands on the route. We're back into trade winds, high pressure to the south, fairly largish seas as there's nothing to break it up. And as we get further to the west, we get to Mauritius and Reunion. Now, it's really Reunion to South Africa that is probably the most testing of the weather and the whole route. Now, we can see on here, close to the African coast, we've got the Agulhas current. For those of you who sail around America and the Gulf Stream, well, the Agulhas current is a western boundary current like the Gulf Stream, and it is strong. So it's bringing a lot of warm, moist air and water from north to south, and we occasionally that's moving up to the north. So you can imagine a strong flowing current and a strong southerly wind. If they mix together, then we start getting some very rough conditions. At best it's uncomfortable, at worst it becomes dangerous. And that's why the Agulhas current has got such a bad reputation. So our main thing is to match our arrival time in South Africa with the weather, the cold fronts and the Agulhas current. So for that part of the rally, we do a full weather support for all of the boats. One of the reasons we go into Durban is that we stay a long way to the north. And that means that the Agulhas current isn't quite as strong and we are further away from the lows of the Southern Ocean. But between Durban and Cape Town, the wind can change quite quickly, the weather changes quite quickly, and so it's still supported weather-wise. There are enough places along the way to do some hops, and so the weather window doesn't need to be quite so long as if you were trying to do it all in one. We've got a weather map here, and on this weather map you can see that we've got high pressure in the Indian Ocean, high pressure in the Atlantic, and a ridge of high pressure between the two. Now to the south we can see this line of cold fronts, and this is what causes the problem. So if the cold fronts move north, interact with the low pressure over the land, which is a heat flow, then we start getting some strong southerly winds. These will last for, on average, 2 to 3 days, and then the more northerly wind, the prevailing wind, takes over again. Tricky place, but with support, not too difficult. And then from Cape Town to Brazil. Often leaving Cape Town, we get some strong winds for the first 2 days, some quite exciting sailing, and then we're into the trade winds. Now, people say that the trade winds of the South Atlantic are the steadiest in the world, and I've done this route a number of times, and I think that they're pretty good. I've always had a good crossing. And then as we get across towards the northeast corner of Brazil, we are coming out of the trade winds and we'll be getting back to the ITCZ or the doldrums. Now, they are usually found just north of Fernando de Noronha, just north of the northeast corner of Brazil. And we go from trade winds to the ITCZ. And once we've gone through the ITCZ, we're back into the trade winds of the northern hemisphere. They're a good strongish trade winds. It's a reach, and you've got a fairly strong favourable current. And that gets us back to the Caribbean and then to Antigua. This little weather map of it, we can see just north of the coast of Brazil, we can see the hashed line, which is the ITCZ. For this particular weather chart, it was just north of the land. Sometimes it comes down and is sitting close to the land. But it's not a particularly wide ITCZ. In fact, if you were going the other way, you tend to keep as far west as possible to cross the ITCZ as far to the west as you can. Now, just to recap, what I consider the main points of particular importance meteorologically wise is the strong wind off the north coast of Colombia. Then we've got the South Pacific Convergence Zone. We need to keep an eye on what's happening there. And then the main one is approaching South Africa and crossing the Agulhas Current. Now, once we're in South Africa, then just keeping an eye on the weather as we go through. So, we're back to Antigua. Now, all the way around the world, you will be able to get forecasts, but there's also a huge amount of weather information. There are pilot and routing charts. In America, they're known as pilot charts. In Europe, in the UK, they're known as routing charts. They all have a huge amount of information. In the UK, we have to buy them by the month and by the ocean basin. Whereas the advantage of the American ones are that you can either buy them in books or you can download them for free as a PDF file. Also around the world, there are lots of good pilot books, the cruising guides, which will help you where the anchorages are and the passage making. There's a picture of the American pilot chart, and then on the bottom is the website you can get them from. Now, there's this very good book, ALRS 3, Admiralty List of Radio Signals. It gives you all the weather forecasts everywhere in the world. Now, you can do a lot of homework before you go. World Meteorological Organization gives you a list of all the meteorological officers around the world, and they've all got websites, so you can find out all the information that's in the ALRS book, but it's a good book to have on board anyway. Now, when I'm at sea crossing oceans, then I usually rely on weather charts. I love the weather chart, typical of the one here that we get in the UK. And around the world, you can get them by weather facts through your SSB radio, or you can by sending a small email to an FTP server. They will send you a picture back as a small email attachment. So there's no excuses. Everywhere in the world you go, or almost everywhere in the world you go, you'll be able to get a good weather chart. And I would always back that up with grid files. There are a large number of grid file providers. I tend to use SailDocs and PredictWind, and sometimes Zygrid. You'll already have your own favourites. They are nearly all the same model, which is the GFS model, the American model. It's global and it's given away for free. There's also another good model, which is the European model, the EMCWF, but you usually have to pay a subscription to pick that one up. So we're back to probably my favourite anchorage that I've been to. I used to think I ought to keep it secret, but there's a very good guide for the San Blas Islands, the Bauhaus guide, and the picture of this anchorage is on the front cover. So it's a secret no more. Need any help with weather and weather forecasts? You can always get hold of me on the nice and hopefully easy to remember christheweather@gmail.com. So now back to Paul.
Thanks, Chris. Awesome session there, and this is the point where we're going to open it up. So any of you online, and I can see there is literally hundreds and hundreds of people online in the room at the moment. So if I could ask the team to come back, i.e. our team within Oyster, so we can see your video and audio. There's Ali. So the guys are going to appear across the bottom of the screen now. There's Millie, there's Chris, Eddie will be here in a second. Fantastic. So any question you've got for us, if you can put in the chat box, then as a team, we will answer that. So let's start with, there's quite a few people in the chat there I noticed were asking about crew. So obviously this is that if you're an Oyster owner, then you are, of course, welcome to join this event. If you're looking to join as crew, then the best thing to do is to drop us a line, drop Ali a line, where we will hold a crew file and we will connect you to suitable owners who are also looking for crew as well. So that's how to do that. Now let's start there's so many questions. I'm going to start to make my way down there to see what we've got. So, okay, interesting question. So this one I think is probably for Eddie. Eddie, are you there? I can't see your video, but is your audio there?
Yeah, I'm already here. My video's dropped out again.
Okay, fine. Okay, so just a quick question, Eddie, on preparation. So in terms of preparation for the rally, what would be your top 3 or 4 tips of things you need to do with your Oyster before you think of doing this trip?
Well, preparation is obviously very important. The better your preparation, the more fun you're going to have. You just spend less time fixing your boat, you'll have more time to enjoy it. So we've produced a document for the last 2 rallies. It's about 38 pages of the minimum checks that we think you should do before you go on any ocean passage, never mind the Oyster World Rally. So it'll serve well for any future passage making that you intend to make. So that can be distributed fairly easily. It's I think we've got a PDF model of it, and also a Word document that you can fill in and return to us to tell us that you've actually made all the checks that are required. So back to you, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. And I can see that Josh there has said, Eddie Google, what a hero. There you go. Eddie Scoots Google, but he's known as Eddie Google within the Oyster fleet, because any questions we have from a technical point of view with any number of the 1,200 oysters that have been built or are on the water, we normally go to Eddie Google for the answer if we don't already have it. Okay, so things like minimum sailing qualifications needed, etc. At the end of this webinar and at the end of the Q&A, Ali is going to put the Oyster World Rally event pack into the chat box. And so if you are interested in entering into the Oyster World Rally, you literally download that, fill in the application form, and return it to us here in Oyster. Just to give you an idea of numbers, we already have 20 people signed up for the next Oyster World Rally, which means there's only 10 places remaining for the next Oyster World Rally. Now, obviously, you need an oyster to take part. So whether that be that you already own an oyster. I can see a number of owners here, so hi to all you guys. But also there are 2 new build slots available if you wanted to build new, and there's also a number of brokerage boats available too. So in terms of you getting your oyster, you just need to connect with us here, and you can send an email direct to me with regards to that. So that's paul.adamson@oysteryachts.com, and I'll connect you with the team who can find you, or we'll build you a beautiful oyster. Eileen O'Farrell, hi Eileen, you've asked, do vessels need to be Cat 0 coded? The answer is no, because you won't be working commercially. However, in terms of safety kit on board, we will supply you with all the relevant lists in terms of what safety kit should be on board that yacht, and that will be very close to code Cat 0 coding. 30 yachts is the maximum. And the reason for that, I'll actually let Eddie answer, because he ran the first Oyster World Rally and I was a participant. Eddie will be the perfect guy to answer that question. So, Eddie, why is 30 boats the maximum?
Well, that's just about the maximum number of boats that we can accommodate in anchorages and various marinas around the world. Plus, on average, each boat has around 4 crew, which amounts to obviously about 120 people. And there'll be guests and family coming and going, and that could rise to as many as 160 to 180 people, which is a lot of people to administer, not just the yachts as well. So 30 is a good number for the on-sea team to be able to handle, and for the various supply chains and stuff like that you'll find on the way around.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Eddie. I can see a note there about the European leg. So it's probably now, obviously this webinar is mostly about the Oyster World Rally. We do plan to hold a Mediterranean rally next year. That's very much in the early stages of planning at the moment. So there'll be more to follow on that. So if you keep an eye on our website, that is an ongoing project. We expect within the next couple of months to announce more about the Oyster Mediterranean Rally that can lead into the Oyster World Rally if that's what you want to do. Is an age restriction on yachts? No, the only restriction is it must be an oyster. So you must be part of the oyster family. Thanks, James. So James there is asking, do you expect COVID to have an impact on the rally? Right now, no. If you think the start is on January 2022, so I would hope we're all through this by that point. What it may have an impact on is the seminars and the training. So I noticed during Chris was doing his presentation there, a number of you were asking about training within the US, etc. So we'll have to adapt and look at all of that. So all of the training is going to be filmed, and it can also be live streamed, and quite a lot of it could also be done in this full format as well, online with the webinar. So when we look at things like coral reef navigation, when we look at weather with Chris, who will run a much more in-depth session, ocean nav, etc. All of those things can be learnt online over the web. The practical hands-on stuff we tend to do with the suppliers here in the UK. So, we will still film it, but we'd urge you to obviously come over. So, we'll just need to adapt and be flexible, just like when we're crossing an ocean in our oysters, that to work out how the training works. So James, overall, in terms of the rally being impacted, I don't think so, not at all. The training at the back end of this year, potentially yes, but we'll keep you posted with that. What else have we got there? Any questions for Chris, by the way? Any question for Chris? Ali, you're muted there, so if you could just...
Sorry, everybody. Yes, there was a question that just flicked through a little earlier about a GRIB file, just to explain in more details what actually is a GRIB file.
Okay, GRIB files are, it's a meteorological model that is put into a file format that can be transferred around the world quite easily and quite small. And the advantage of them is that you can overlay them on electronic charting. so that you will not only see the weather on your electronic chart, but you can also animate it, which I think brings the whole weather to life, because you see things moving in 3 dimensions, and it is really useful. Now, generally, it's the same model as the weather charts, but depending where you are, it might be a slightly different model. So it will be the same as your weather chart. It just means that you can see it in 3-hour or 6-hourly steps, rather than the charts that might only be every day or every 2 days. But it's just weather information in a usable file format. I suppose we have to add with that is that whereas if you're listening to a weather forecast, you will have a forecaster's input. With the GRIB files, it cannot, it's just purely computer generated. There's no forecaster input. And so there is some interpretation needed and a little bit of knowledge needed to interpret them to the best extent.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. There's another question for you as well. Could you recommend some reading for world climatology learning, please? That's for Paul. Good man, Paul.
Hi, Paul. For world climatological information, the pilot charts and the routing charts are a really good place to start. There is a book called an Admiralty book called Ocean Passages for the World, and that gives you also a very good overview of different different oceans and the different weather that you're likely to meet in each one, the routes that you would likely to go. So those are 2 good publications. And then I'd be a bit remiss if I didn't push the book that I wrote, the RYA Weather Handbook. So I'd say get a copy of that as well.
I learnt my weather from there as well. Yeah, absolutely. One from Liam over in Dublin. Nice to see you, Liam. So, Chris, what do you find to be the easiest downwind sail configuration? So 2 head sails poled out. How much dead running was there? So I can add a little bit in on this first, Liam. Mostly it was broad reaching for us on Lush. So we'd pole out the headsail, and with a preventer on the main, we would true wind angle generally was about 140 or thereabouts. Apparent wind angle about 120 for most of the way for us. But I'll hand over to Chris to give his opinion too.
I'd have to agree with that. For our boats, we were nearly all the way a poled out head sail. A lot of the passage, there were just the 2 of us. So with a poled out head sail, preventer on the main, it was very easy to handle with just 2 people. When we had guests, it makes me sound like a charter boat. When friends and family came out and joined us, then we did sometimes put the spinnaker up if it was light wind. But I'd say vast majority of the time, poled out head sail.
Yeah, I think sail configuration depends a lot on the strength of the crew as well, and how many people you've got on board.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, fantastic. So Susan, you're asking about kids on board. So yes, there are other families who will be taking part. There's actually a family called Leo and Kate, and they're two young girls. And they bought an Oyster 655 last year with the intent of going off and doing the Oyster World Rally. So there are a number of families who will be on the next Oyster World Rally. And something we're actively looking at the moment is actually looking at how we do the homeschooling, etc., and things like that, and whether or not there's a way we can get a special rally education pack for the children on board. So yeah, the age ranges varies. So anywhere between, on our rally, I think the youngest child, and I might be wrong on number, I think it was about 7 and 9, and they were on an Oyster 66. Millie, on your rally, was there any young children 17, 19 that you can remember?
Yes, we did have a couple. I think the youngest was around the same age as you just said, 7 years old. So there's a good range.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the opportunity to take your kids and do this trip would just be amazing. Just the education, just the geography, meeting new people, new cultures, and also learning to navigate, look at the weather. There's so much that kids can learn and do on board when they do this trip, for sure. Okay, let's have a look. What else have we got there? Oh, they're all pouring in now. Okay. So stopover length of times. So in the rally information pack that is going to be put at the end of the webinar here, you will find that there's quite a comprehensive spreadsheet in terms of how long the legs would be, depending on what speed you're traveling with 6, 8 or 10 knots. And then it shows you where the support team is on location and how long you would generally spend there. Interestingly, that's just jogged my memory on that. So actually what happens out in the field, maybe Eddie, if I can ask Eddie that question. So in the field, when the guys go around the world, we've obviously got a logistics person there and a technical person there. So if you could share with the people online now what happens from our side, that'd be great, please.
Yeah, on the timeline, orange line is when the support team will be on location. Okay, and that doesn't mean to say that you've got to be there at the start or leave at the end. You can arrive or leave any time in that band. Okay, I think I've got one here.
There we go.
You get something like this. Okay, now between each at the end of each orange line where the support team are, there's a timeline that'll take you to get to the next destination. So that's if you travel non-stop with an average speed of 6, 8, or 10 knots, and you'll notice that there are sort of white gaps in between. Well, the white gaps in between that's your free cruising time. So there's ample time to repair, replenish, sightsee, and enjoy between stops.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stops. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Eddie. Question from Simon there. Do you have to have the RWA qualification if you have an equivalent from another organisation, so National Governing Body? The answer is when you fill out your application form, we will have a look at it, and it's judged on experience. So you don't necessarily have to have all of the tickets as such. We are just looking at your overall sailing experience just to make sure that you are suitably experienced to take your yacht and sail it off around the world. So just to help you with that. For Michael, there is no lead yacht or crew. Effectively, what happens is the technical support and the logistics team are ahead of the boats generally, just as Eddie was saying there. And so as you arrive into new locations, you will find a team there waiting for you. Right. What else have we got in here? Medical support. Yeah. So medical support. So part of the training, you will need to do some type of medical training. Typically, if you're a professional sailor, you would be doing the ship's captain's medical course or something like that. We've got a partner company here in Southampton that we're partnering with that will do all of the medical training for us. But what they'll also do is they'll also supply you with the medical kit on board your yacht. Now where that becomes really important is should you require their services, they also operate a medical support, which means you can phone and you can speak to a person that you already know because they've trained you, and also because they've supplied the kit, they can say, right, go into Pelican case number 4, open it up. Right, in there you'll see pack number 10, pull out that pack, and in there you'll find X. And so that will give you really good medical support as you go off and around the world. Now, touch wood, so far, we haven't had any major medical issues on board. So again, all about the preparation. But just in case there was a medical issue on a boat, we are fully covered from that point of view as well. Okay, what else have we got? How many crew is ideal? Good question. I'm going to give that one to Eddie?
I would say depends. Okay. Now, if you're a family, you have a family crew, but ideally a crew of about 4 is about as many as you really want to take. Even a 60-footer, you know, your personal space becomes very valuable to you, because the longer you spend on the boat, the smaller it appears to become. So your personal space is quite valuable to you. Now, you can crew 2 up, and you should check with your insurer if your insurance company is happy for you to do that. So experienced people can crew 2 up, but it just means that there's, you know, long passages can be quite tiring. So with a crew of 3, you get twice as much rest with 3 people as you do with 2 people. So 3 is a good number as well. But 4, yeah, that's pretty good. If you're getting up into 8, no, don't. No. So 3 and 4. I mean, I know people have fallen out with their best friends on the first trip. So yeah, it's a very difficult one. Unless you spent a lot of time on boats before, I would say, you know, start off with maybe 4. If you feel that you need more, well, get more. But you need to know the people you're going to have on board, because it's the whole dynamic between friendships and stuff like that changes when you're on a boat. Back to you, Paul.
Absolutely. And so, Eddie, just on that. So, interestingly, on both of the previous Oyster World rallies, there was, you know, people were asking lots of questions about crew prior to going, but actually it turned out not to be an issue at all, right? So there tended to be quite a pool of crew that actually would jump from boat to boat, right, Eddie?
Yeah, the crew situation, you know, it doesn't take long for the floating village to develop, and the crew situation can be fairly fluid, whereas crew can be lent to another boat, or if you have if you're on a passage where you don't need the crew up for the next passage, well, they can perhaps move on to another boat if they're well known enough and they perform well. So a good crew are hard to find, and you know, generally in demand. Once you've got a name, you're in demand. So if you're a good crewman, you work hard, keep your nose clean, you'll be in demand within the fleet.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. So, Millie, you sailed across the Pacific on board Enzo. Tell us maybe a little bit about what was your special moment on board?
Oh, there's so many. So many. For me, the highlight, hands down, has got to be in Tonga. We were very, very lucky to be there when the humpback whales were there giving birth. So we had a very, very special experience where we were able to go and interact with the whales and swim with them on 3 occasions. And just unbelievable to be in the water with such amazing creatures. And that will stay with me forever. But yeah, tons of memories. I mean, the Pacific is an incredible place to go sailing. We had fantastic weather the whole way, pretty much. Amazing, you know, weather conditions, amazing temperatures, amazing people, the cultures. I can't speak highly of it enough. And the World Rally fleet as well, to have those boats as company, just made the whole experience so much richer and better off. So yeah, I can't say enough. Just once in a lifetime.
Fantastic. And then, so what was the best party you guys had?
Oh, best party. There were lots of parties. Best party. Or I think, to be honest, some of the best ones were the smaller ones on, you know, desert island, barbecue, beers, chill times, just really relaxed. And although Oyster do organise a lot of trips and parties along the way, the World Rally participants, obviously, they organise their own too. And I'm pretty sure that, you know, most boats will have social evenings, you know, a few times a week at least. So there's a massive social element to the rally. And I think that's a big tie for people to do it.
Absolutely. And actually, for those of you online at the moment, I can see there's a few people that are here who actually did the World Rally. So big hi to those guys. Fantastic. Okay. And Ali, maybe expand a little bit more then on the training side of things. So in terms of, you know, what we're expecting to do, how it all works, how we might adapt things.
Yes, well, basically, what we're trying to do is, as we said at the beginning, is prepare the boats and the crew and the skippers and the owners to the best of our ability before you set off, so that you get the most out of your experience on the World Rally. We want you to be fault-free on your boat, and we want you to sail fantastically and just have the best time. And so, you know, we put great steel on preparation. So we try to take you through each major section of an oyster yacht and train you up to know how it works properly, how to maintain it, and to do some fault finding if it's not working to its best ability. So in that respect, the workshops that we have, we do on the electrics, on the engine, on the generator, on all the deck hardware, on your hydraulics, and basically every part of the boat that we feel you need to know intimately to be able to get yourself around the world and enjoy it and be safe. And that's a really, really important thing. And on the safety side, we will have a seminar from one of our supporters, which is Ocean Safety, who will then describe all the different safety equipment, those that are on your boat as standard and those that you can buy in addition to enhance the safety on your boat. And also navigation. Ocean navigation is an art, and as Chris has already explained, interpreting the weather, interpreting information, and trying to find that information to be able to be able to sail safely and to the correct destination is really, really important. And so we'll be offering courses on ocean navigation and up to the standard of RWA ocean theory. So basically what we're trying to say is that we want to make you as prepared as we possibly can so you can enjoy your experience to the best of your ability.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ali. That's super. I saw a question there. It's kind of disappeared off my screen, but the question was, is it okay to take a small dog? And I think, Trevor, you asked that question, so I'll throw that to Eddie. So, Eddie, what's your views on taking a dog on board around the world?
In a word, don't. Pets will cause problems with immigration and quarantine. Don't do it.
Okay, thanks, Eddie. So, yeah, no, that is the thing, is of course everywhere you arrive, then of course you've got to go through customs and immigration, and part of that is obviously every living thing on board. So therefore, if you do have an animal with you, what it means is either the animal has to go through quarantine and all of these things, it becomes a complete nightmare for you. So our recommendation, as Eddie said in one word, is probably not a good idea on that one. Okay, what else have we got in here? Any more questions for Chris on the weather? I can see there's lots of you here. We've talked about how many crew. Eddie, what about watch systems? Tell us about watch systems and what you think is best to have on board.
Well, watch systems, I mean, everybody's got an opinion on that. Well, my favourite watch system was when the watch is split in three. Depends on how many people you got on board, but if you have 3 watches on board, my preference was to do like 5s and 3s. That's 5-hour day watches and 3-hour night watches split between, for example, if you've got 3 people. So your day watch would start at 7 o'clock in the morning, local time. You would stay on till 11. The next watch comes on at 11. It goes off again at 4. Is it 4? Yeah, 4. And then the next watch comes on and goes off again at the 10 o'clock, I think it is. So then you start the 3-hour watches overnight. So you've only got, if you're on watch by yourself, really a short night watch is really what you want. Whereas a 5-hour day watch is, that's an easy one. And then you then have like 16 hours in the day off to rest and perform other duties like route maintenance, navigation, keeping the boat clean, stuff like that.
Okay.
So there's any amount of information you can go on watches. In fact, the World Rally Manual has a piece on watches as well, which is very useful. That's the thing we haven't mentioned yet is the Rally Manual, which is a really useful and important document.
Yeah,
Back to you,
absolutely.
Paul.
So Ali, would you expand on what the Oyster World Rally is?
So you disappeared there.
Hi, Paul. Could you just say that again? Sorry, we missed you.
No problem. So could you just expand on what the Oyster World Rally Manual is, please?
Wow, the Oyster World Rally Manual is probably the most important document that an oyster owner will ever receive doing this event. Basically, it covers absolutely everything, and the origination of the document is from Eddie and his wife Debbie. They on the first rally wrote or added to this guide every single piece of information from embassies to consulates to oh, there we go, Eddie. Yeah, that's how big it is. To immigration, customs, birthing, what to see when you get to a certain destination, how to fly there, what to eat, how you can buy your food and your provisioning. I saw there was a question about provisioning. In the guide, it tells you where the best supermarkets are in the best places. So, for example, do you stock up in the Caribbean before you get to Panama? Do you go to a supermarket in Panama before you get to Galapagos? It's all in the guide, as well as weather information that Chris will and has already written for us. Basically, it's a wealth of information, and everybody, if not anybody, would like to get their hands on this guide, but it is only available to the owners and skippers of the Oyster World Rally.
Absolutely. And I can see that Sydney there has popped in the Oyster Bible, and it is absolutely that. I can remember when it was first delivered to us whilst we're building Lush, and it is literally the Bible. You can go through all the research has been done of who to contact in all the locations, from services, provisioning, all of that sort of thing. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so let's have a look at what other questions. There's also a question from Beckway, which I saw. I need to find it, and it's probably, and it was something to do with repairs. I'm gonna have to go down and find it. Has anybody seen it? Any other of the team? I think it was what was the most common repair we had to do on the rally. So that's probably another one for Eddie. And it was from, I can't find you in the chat. There's so many people. It's from an Oyster 72 in Beckway though. That's what I saw. So Eddie, common repairs?
Well, there isn't any such thing as a common repair. What was common was things that broke that hadn't been because of lack of maintenance or lack of preparation. But I would say the most common repair on the rally was probably toilets, actually.
Okay. And we can run a seminar on that, of how to sort those out. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Good to see Steve here, who's in Antigua at the moment. Steve, if you join, you'll get one, no problem at all. That was from Nigel, I believe, in Beckway. The chat is whizzing down again, so let's see what else we've got. So this is from Nigel. Thank you very much. So we won't talk about how that repair could be avoided. Size of yachts, most common size of yachts. So in terms of the common size, it tends to be the 50 to 60 foot oysters that are the vast majority of the fleet. There are some big boats, there are some sub 50 footers, but generally kind of Oyster 49 size, etc., and things like that. What else have we got? So this one's for Chris. So max wave height expected to be encountered, max current wind speed, from Thomas.
Hi, Thomas. Fortunately, it's a bit like how long's a piece of string. You would normally expect the maximum wind speed to be on the leading edge of a squall, and generally you'd find those probably 25 to 35 knots. But if you've got a very big squall, you could easily see gale force gusts, 40, 45 knots, possibly a bit more. The strongest consistent wind outside of a squall, generally I would think probably about 25 to 30 knots. Going across the Agulhas, towards the Agulhas current, if you did get a cold front coming up, then you could get a period of 30, 35 knots. But that's why you'd be having weather support to help you across. Wave heights, again, if you got caught in a gearless current with wind against the current, then they can go quite big. But what's more important than the actual wave height is the wavelength. So it's the period. And we'll often in the Pacific or the Indian Ocean, you'll look and you'll see, oh, the wave models are showing 3.5, 4 meters of swell, but they've got a 15, 16 second period. So they are high, but they're not very steep. I would say on my last trip to Australia, our steepest waves were just off the Colombian coast when we had about 35 knots of wind, but a short and a steep sea, because where we were, there was a little bit of adverse current. Current-wise, in some places you can get 1.5 knots of current, generally favourable. But if you're trying to push into a lagoon against the tide, and if there's a big swell putting a lot of water in the lagoon, then you can get 4 or 5 knots of current against you going into a lagoon. So I can't be that specific. After all, I'm a meteorologist. So, and I'm going to give you a yes or a no. There are places to watch for, particularly wind against current for the biggest waves, because they'll be short, biggest wind speeds, big squalls, and the current generally favourable, probably mainly less than a knot.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, one from Bruno here for you. So just explain a little bit more. You know the headland on the Colombian coast, as you sail past that, you tend to get a bit of weather off the end there.
Yeah, it's the strongest wind is usually a little bit, instead of the headland, which Paul, you quite carefully didn't name because it's a totally unpronounceable name to me.
I remember the name.
It's the Venezuelan-Colombian border.
Ah.
As you get, it's the strongest wind is usually as you get further west, as you're approaching Santa Marta, and that is a combination because you've got an east to northeasterly trade wind. It's beginning to be compressed a little bit on that headland, and you've also got high mountains, so any northeasterly in it can't go over the land and up the mountain, and low pressure over Colombia. So you've kind of got the three things generating a strong wind there. So quite often you'll see in forecasts that it is 35 knots off that corner, sometimes a little bit more. It is well forecast, but it is that combination of the land, the high pressure, the low pressure, all coming together. And just near Santa Marta, and then that continues round almost as far as Cartagena. So it's not a big area, and it will extend around about 100 miles offshore. So if you're not stopping in Colombia, you can go around the north of it. If you are stopping in Colombia, then you just need to take care on the approach of that.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Chris, for that. Eddie, probably one for you, actually. So I can see we've got a few Oyster 45 owners in the room. So hi to Nick and Dee, and I think there's some others as well. And they're asking, would their 45 be too slow? And I can see that Tom, who's just done the Oyster World Rally on his boat, and also Robert was naming that Vela was a 45 and Sun Susi was a 46. So your opinion on that one, please, Eddie?
No, 45 is fine. You'll be able to keep up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, fantastic. Okay. So don't feel as though you can't join us with your Oyster 45. You're very welcome. Chris's handbook, it is the Bible from a weather point of view. So yes, it probably does include that. I'm assuming Chris, your strong wind areas. I can see people have bought it online, which is great. You know, so fantastic. Good afternoon for you, Chris. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. Thanks for that. With the handbook, it isn't quite as with the OA with the handbook. It won't be quite so specific for just the coast of Colombia, but we do include that in the Oyster handbook for the rally it takes the route and it splits it up into each section of the route. So it does cover it in that.
Yeah, and it's probably worth saying as well to you guys that actually, so Chris is our meteorologist for the rally. So Chris is available for weather routing and gives us advice all the time. You know, so wherever the boats are, we keep an eye on what is going on from a meteorological point of view, and also we can feed the fleet for forecasts via email from Chris. Now, how do we know where you are? Well, part of the conditions of entry is your yacht must have a yellow brick tracker on board. That means that we can see where you are, and you can set that to update at whatever time interval you want, so whether it be 2 hours, 24 hours, whatever it may be. But that allows us then to monitor where the fleet is, and from a safety point of view, and also allows you guys, quite often you'll have a sat phone on board, you can see where other people are. And actually as well, something that was great on both of the rallies is the SSB net. So once you're in the Pacific, SSB radio is a must. And twice a day we'd have the Oyster net, which is where all the fleet caught up in the morning and in the evening. We just had a roll call, every boat spoke. And it was quite amazing to be in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and yet you can hear friends who are maybe only 50 miles away, a few hundred miles away, and of course we'd all be looking after each other. So if there was a problem with any of the boats, the most nearest help would obviously be the fleet, who we could reroute and bring in to help us. And that also brings us on to things like spare parts. So with Oyster After Sales, when you join up, we will look at your Oyster and give you a recommended spares list to carry on board, and we can supply those as well. And then part of that as well is the fleet will also share spares, so that's really handy. So if you're running low on something, you quite often find another boat may have it, so they'll give you the part and you can flip around, etc., and things like that. So it is very much, when Eddie referred to the global village, it is very much that spirit and camaraderie, and you do make friends for life on this event. So Chris Tibbs' last name it's Chris Tibbs. For Robert, what opportunities are there to sail off piste? So I'll give that one to Eddie, I guess.
So say again.
So what opportunities are there to sail off piste, Eddie? So
yeah, well, that's what it's all about, really. There's no start and there's no finish. It's not like some other events. There's a day that everybody starts and then there's a prize given for that particular leg or whatever. There's none of that. We actively encourage off-piste sailing, if you want to put it like that, because it is an adventure. Now, I often kid Ali on about she's gone zooming around the jaggy bit at the bottom of the world and stuff like that, and never seen much of the tropical part in the middle. So yeah, it is an adventure, and we actively encourage off-piste sailing, if you want to put it like that. See the islands, plan ahead. Have a look at the route and make a plan ahead instead of just kind of blundering along. There's plenty of time to see different islands. I'm kind of running out of words here where I'm thinking, by the time you get to French Polynesia, you can almost see the next island anyway. It's almost like day sailing between the islands. Yeah. So, sailing through the Tuamotus, stuff like that, plan ahead. And just one point on the Tuamotus, Chris mentioned earlier about sailing in lagoons and stuff like that, where you can get 5 or 6, sometimes 7 knots coming out of the lagoons when and the tide. So the best, if you're doing Tuamotus, try and make your entry at slack water. You certainly don't want to be going in full flood, because you just get vacuumed in, sucked in. So you better sort of arriving at slack water or just as the tide starts to ebb, where you've got control of your entry, rather than just getting vacuumed in to a lagoon. Off-piste sailing, absolutely. Get on with it.
Absolutely, you can explore. And one thing that's great, and what we found is that we would totally go off piste and then come back and meet the main bunch of the fleet, just depending on how we felt. We pulled out the charts and we went off and explored. I see a question there on piracy. So Fortunately, it's pretty safe. We do take a huge amount of advice from the UK government, etc., and things like that on security. You're probably more at risk in the Caribbean than anywhere else in the world, in my humble opinion. And I think a lot of this is, as long as you're sensible with your yacht, so i.e. making sure that it's locked on board whenever you're asleep on board it at night, anchor, etc., then, it should be absolutely fine. Eddie, Chris, Ali, Millie, any advice on security from you guys?
Yeah, I did a lot of research for the first World Rally on security, and I met some fairly scary people that specialised in security for boats and stuff like that. Now, the long and the short of it is it's a pretty safe route, and if, as Paul's already pointed out, the most dangerous place on the rally is actually the Caribbean. So, lock your boat up. Don't be foolish. Don't leave valuables on deck. You can winch your dinghy on board at night if you feel so the need to do so, and just be as careful as you normally would and sailing anywhere else. There's no being boarded at sea. Approached and boarded at sea is I could almost 99% say point, because nothing's an absolute certainty. That's just not going to happen. So Captain Sparrow's not going to sail up behind you and demand rum and stuff like that. That's just not going to happen. Paul.
Absolutely. Okay. So that just reminded me of when we were anchored in the Cocos Keeling Islands, and this tiny little boat appeared, this tiny little fishing boat, and the next thing that the window flung open, and there was Eddie saying, "I want beer and rum. What have you got?" So actually, Captain Jack Sparrow does come and take all your rum and all your beer. But anyway, that's by the by. Bit of fun. So Liam. I can see that you are during a lockdown list of pilot books to read. So best thing to do there is touch base with Dee in after sales, and she has that list of what pilot books, etc., and all the charts, and she'll be able to send you the list. And if you want them, you of course can order them. Ali, you were about to say something.
Can I just interject there? Yes, we're just updating that list at this very present time, because the list obviously was made for the 2017 rally, so it's slightly gone past its sell-by date now, and there's lots of new editions of some of the books, and we've been able to add a lot more books that have appeared over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. We've also tried to add a section on books for the kids as well, so that there's more interesting things for them, and also more books have obviously been written since 2017. So we're busy just updating that now. Very aware that people may have a little bit more time at the moment because of the virus situation. So we're hoping to get that finished in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll be able to send it out to all the owners for them to have a look and choose which ones they'd like to buy and read. But it is a really comprehensive list which covers everything from your pilot books, your navigation, down to what whales, dolphins, fish you can find in certain areas on the rally, to bird spotting, to all sorts of things. So it's a really interesting cross section of publications that we offer.
Brilliant, thank you, Ali. So John, just one for you. So there is one start date actually, and that is the 9th of Jan. 9th of Jan, is that right, guys? Just before I announce it to the world. So Sunday 9th of Jan. Sunday 9th of January in Antigua, but that's the only date we hold you to in terms of that is the date that you begin. Now you could begin on the 10th or the 11th or prior, and the fleet will catch you up however you want, but 9th of Jan is when we'll be firing the cannon up at Shirley Heights to see everybody off on their world adventure. Fees, costs, budgets, that's all in the rally information pack, which you'll be able to download in a minute at the end of the webinar. There will be a website and bulletin board for participants to link up, and people will link up through the seminars as well. That website is being built in the background at the moment. So the 17-19 pages come down. There'll be a new one up very soon. What else have we got there? Hi, Pow. Good to see you. Dates for the next rally, we're not sure. We obviously want you to do the next one, Pow. But yeah, potentially there will be another rally after this one. In fact, if we look at the history of the Oyster World Rally, that it was actually created by a lady called Liz Whitman, and it very nearly didn't happen. And the reason is Liz was sitting in a board meeting, and they were trying to suss out what was the best thing to do to commemorate 40 years of Oyster Yachts, and she put her hand up at the end and said, well, actually, I've got this idea. How about we run an Oyster World Rally? And that was the rally that I participated in 2013, and Eddie ran along with his wife, Debbie. And then it became so popular, we ran the second one, and now we're running the third one as well. Standard keel or centerboard keel for the World Rally? Eddie, that's one for you. Hi, John. Good to see you as well there.
Either's okay. There's plenty of deep water.
Yeah.
Centerboard will work just as well. It's not. We're not like sailing in the Bahamas where reducing your draft might be kind of useful. No, centerboard or full keel doesn't really matter.
Okay, fantastic.
I was just going back to piracy. There's a section in the World Rally Manual about piracy as well. It's just advice and so forth. If anybody wants to know more about that, there you go.
Okay, fantastic. So I'll start to wrap it up there, guys. Any more questions? We do have a bit more time. So if you've got any more questions, just pop them in the chat box. We are Andrew, I'm going to come to your question in a minute. We are going to run more webinars over the coming weeks, and these can be on subjects that you guys are interested in. So what would be really good is after this, if you could give us a bit of feedback, and if you could send it to Emma, who's online in the background moderating this webinar, and her email address is emma.jarvis@oysteryachts.com, and she'll pop it in the chat box there. Any feedback you've got for us will be really gratefully received. And also, if there's any particular thing you want to know about from us at Oyster, so whether it be, I don't know, water maker maintenance, what's the correct sail plan for downwind sailing through squalls, or how do you man overboard, whatever it may be, please give us the feedback, and our team will go off and create the training and the webinars for you as well. So Andrew, just to come to your question, looking for a used oyster, timing may not be on time. How quickly places will be taken, or when does entry closes? So entry closes when, Ali?
Entry closes 1st of December this year, so 1st of December 2020.
However, Andrew, you probably do need to keep in mind that we only have 10 places left. And to give you an idea, there are hundreds and hundreds of people on this webinar. So we do expect this event to be oversubscribed and pretty soon. So if you are, and this goes for anybody out there as well, is if you are serious about doing the Oyster World Rally, what I would urge you to do is to download the information pack at the end of the webinar, which we're going to throw in the chat box, and touch base with us as quickly as possible, so we can talk to you about you getting one of those 10 places. Okay, what else have we got there? Checklist.
If I could just say that if anybody's interested in crewing on the event, then just send your CV through to me, which is Ali, ALLIE.Smith@oysteryachts.com. Thank you.
So for Jason, how do I get my yacht rebranded as an Oyster? It's very simple. Come and speak to our team. We'd be delighted to build you a stunning new Oyster, or go and find you a stunning pre-loved Oyster as well. Okay, anything else, guys? We'll take 2 more questions. So if there's anything else there, just pop it in the chat box. You're welcome, Susan. Great to see you on the webinar. If you do have any subsequent questions, what will happen as is in the top there is that this webinar is being recorded, and so automatically what will happen is the replay will be available in about an hour's time. So you'll get an email in 24 hours time that says watch the replay now. So if you want to come back and look at it, you can. Any questions that you need to ask subsequently to that, just send them into either Ali or Millie. Anything else there?
Just to let you know that we do have some information on the Oyster website about the Oyster World Rally. So if you go to www.oysteryachts.com and click on the Oyster World Rally pages, and it does give you more information about how the rally works, a bit about the timings, and some just general information. If we haven't covered any of the topics or questions that you might have, you may find the answers in those pages. There was one question there about how many Oyster employees accompany the yachts on the rally. Well, what we have is, I think we mentioned it before, we have one of our technical guys plus one of our event coordinators will be at each of the major stopovers, just there to facilitate and to help you and to advise. And at the bigger stopovers, we may have a second technical person there, and we will at strategic places as well have a rigger as well. So we're there to help you as much as possible, and the teams in the field will always be in constant contact with us back in the UK, so that we can help support both yourselves and our team to give you the best experience possible.
Absolutely, thank you, Ali. So David, just in response to your question there is one build slot available for Oyster 565 hull number 8, which would take delivery in September next year. So if that is of interest, then just drop me a line at paul.adamson@oysteryachts.com, and I'll connect you with the relevant person in the sales team to speak to you about that. What else have we got? It's good to see lots of owners here, so it's good to see. Hi, Julia. Good to see you here. Hi, Michael. Good to see you here too. Lots of people. Oh, it's going up. Thank you. And yes, and also, of course, if a new build doesn't appeal, then we have lots of brokerage yachts as well. So many people, especially for the second Oyster World Rally, bought a brokerage boat and they did the rally, and then they sold it after. So you can be an Oyster owner just for the rally as well. And there are some stunning Oyster 56s out there, Mike being owns one of them there. So yeah, thank you very much. So you can speak to our brokerage team as well. You're welcome, Andrew, all the way from the Galapagos on 47503. Fantastic.
Oh, very jealous. I'd love to be there right now. Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've been talking to Andrew recently. Actually, it's quite a funny story he might tell you sometime.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are literally, you've heard from us. So we're just literally going to play a video for you to watch as we close down this session. And it's actually a video that we put together of the participants who did the last Oyster World Rally and some of their thoughts on it. During that time, also what will happen as well is Ali will drop the Oyster World Rally event pack into the chat box. So all you need to do is literally just click that, you download the application form, it's all there, and if you're ready to go off and sail around the world and fulfill a lifelong dream, then of course we'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon. A major big thank you to Chris Tibbs for joining us. Chris, you're a complete legend, thank you very much. Same to Ali, Eddie and Millie as well. We couldn't do this without the team within Oyster, so a major thank you to you guys. So we're gonna literally, you're gonna see us disappear, and what you're gonna see is you're gonna see the guys who have just completed their Oyster World Rally last year. So stay safe, look after yourselves, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Bye, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.
When we were planning this rally, there were probably 100 reasons why the timing wasn't perfect for us to do it. You know, I've got aged parents and grandchildren on the way and a business. So it would be so easy to say, well, let's just wait a few years. But you never know health-wise what's around the corner. You know, if you've got the time, you've got the health, and you can afford to do it, absolutely go for it, 100%. Don't hesitate.
Then all of a sudden, Lisa decides to go to the UK for one of your propaganda things about the World Rally. And she calls me up there and she says, Ken, we got the boat. This is great. These people are wonderful. Let's close down the business and go. I said, have you thought about this? She said, yeah. I said, okay, let's do it.
I wouldn't have missed it for the world. It was absolutely once in a lifetime opportunity and experience. You know, it'd go on forever, really, saying how wonderful it was.
So I would say, do the rally. Be something that you'll never regret.
From a non-sailor, anybody's thinking of doing it, just do it.
So what would I say to somebody who was considering it? I can tell you immediately, because I already said it. If you're available to do it, then don't hesitate. There's one life, live it.